Hello and welcome to the Mandalorians Ramble. I'm your host, Boba Fett. Today we are joined by Pre Vizsla.
Milk.
And for those of you who know, yes, Pre Vizsla did die, but like we do with Django, my father, we use Dark Sister magic to reanimate him. So that's how he's joining us here today. But like I said in last episode, we are going to kind of continue our journey into cryptozoology and talk about dragons. However, when it comes to dragons, they aren't necessarily classified as being part of cryptozoology, and they are considered to be more mythological, but can kind of fall into that same category. But so to kick things off, obviously dragons are very popular within the world today, but going down to the basics, dragons are usually described as being winged, having the ability of flight, a reptile-like creature that is capable of breathing fire. And it is also said that they are believed to be highly intelligent and are said to have something to do with magic. That's like where they get the ability to breathe fire. Do you want to add anything, Pre?
Yeah, also with dragons, there's many opportunities where different breeds and they have fire, ice, wind.
Yeah, I mean, well, that is true. The most common depiction when it comes to dragons is fire, and those other elements aren't really necessarily prominent for dragons like fire is, but there are still variations out there, which we can go a little more in depth later on. So, and dragons been, it's not like kind of like a recent thing where they've just someone made it up. Dragons have been around for centuries, and they're part of many different folklores and mythologies around the world. It's not just like in one given area. And depending on where you're looking, dragons can be described in similar but also different ways, so to speak.
For sure.
And so just a little brief about that is when it comes to like Western cultures, it's usually the same, the common way that we are used to seeing dragons, like I mentioned before, winged, reptile, and fire breathing. But things change a bit differently when it comes to Eastern cultures for dragons, and they're depicted as being wingless and more serpentine-like, which is kind of an interesting thing.
And also when it comes to them, like there's some to where some can have wings, some cannot.
Yeah.
There is also like when it comes to certain dragons, I've noticed in some movies and games where you would have a dragon, right? And be two kinds. So like one would be fire and ice, which doesn't make sense, but that's in like a mythic reasoning of how some people put it.
Yeah. Before we get into like movies, games, and TV shows and all that, let's just go down to like the origins and like kind of like the basics of like how dragons started out. The first ever known dragon um, that we know of comes from the Chinese mythology, and where it's very prominent within their culture.
Yeah.
Um, and what was it? During in right around in eastern Mongolia between 4500 and 3000 BC, a C-shaped carving of a dragon made out of jade was discovered, and that was our first um, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Not necessarily sighting, but um, an artifact or whatever you want to call it to represent how dragons were kind of seen.
Yeah.
And when it came to especially Chinese mythology, dragons, like I said, were a massive part of this, and they revolved a lot of their culture around it, and um, they put dragons on their clothing. This was especially seen on the robes of like an emperor, and
Oh shit.
dragons also really represented like power and wealth for the Chinese. I mean, each mythology has its own different forms of dragons, and they're each represented differently. Um, Not to go into all of them, but another good example of a non like Chinese dragon comes from the Norse mythology, where you have Fafnir, who was a dwarf who was turned into a dragon due to his greed.
Yeah.
It is quite interesting. But I mean, you look back at it, dragons just date so far back, and
Yeah.
you know who really knows if they even existed or not. I mean, that's like the whole part of it. It's the fascination of them, not only, but it's whether or not like did these things actually exist, or could they still exist today and just be somewhere we don't know.
Yeah.
And there
And
was, what were you gonna say?
also when it comes to if dragons are existent or not, I mean that's where the books and the research come into play by people and scientists, where they want to prove if dragons are real or not.
Yeah, and there was a fossil that was found, a dinosaur fossil, you can say, that caused many people to believe that dragons did exist at one point. Well, obviously, this was never like officially confirmed as being a dragon fossil, but the way that it looked made people believe that dragons could have existed.
Yeah.
I mean, now to talk about like some of the things that they can do. Obviously, we've been over how um, the main ability being flight and being capable of breathing fire. Well,
Mm-hmm.
in different aspects where you look, that can be different slightly. Um, but usually, when it comes to dragons, we think of fire breathing and large reptile like creatures flying. However, as time went on, we were able to see more different variations of dragons. That being the ability to breathe fire, lightning, ice, poison, water. There's just so many different things that dragons have been said to be able, or whatever elements that they said they can enhance.
Yeah, I've seen the main ones be like fire and water.
Yeah,
Are like the two main ones that I've seen around when it comes to mythology and everything else.
yeah, and it's. But we all know, obviously, the most common of that is fire. Do you want to
I
say
mean, in
anything?
Earth,
What?
in Earth, too.
Yeah, I don't really wouldn't say that one's all that popular because I feel like you don't really
No,
see like, you know, dragons that are like Earth-like.
I mean, I would say more of like fire and water.
Yeah, I mean the main one's probably like fire, maybe ice. You could
Yeah,
also do
definitely the most
water.
common one,
Um, like I said, it really just comes to like where you look at all this because um, everyone has like a different depiction of dragons, and they all mean different things in different cultures and mythologies,
for sure.
which is quite interesting. So like I definitely wouldn't have say for you guys to research it yourself and see what you can find because that's the fun part of it and just kind of diving into this kind of thing because we can only go so far ourselves, so you guys can find out things that maybe we don't know. So I would definitely do that if you are all interested in that. um, but and especially in today's world, I feel like dragons have kind of had a boost in popularity. Do you agree?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like we're seeing more, them popping up more in different things. um you know we find different discoveries from mythologies from like you know thousands of years ago. We're still finding out so many things about them that we didn't know before. But when it comes to back within the last let's say 50 or so years, dragons have become a lot more popular in the world of pop culture, and they have been incorporated into several different books, movies, TV shows, and video games. And the cool part about that is that each of these things kind of represent dragons in their own unique way. Um, but and one thing that I really kind of I think draws the fascination of dragons, like kind of what gets people interested and invested in them, it when you give a dragon a personality. What do you think, Bree?
Um, I mean, I would agree. It does bring out a lot of personality traits when it comes to dragons.
Yeah, because
Um,
it makes you more interested in them. It's like, oh,
yeah,
it's like, well, what are they kind of gonna do? And I mean, you don't always get that in depictions, but when you do, it makes it all the more exciting. So I think, which
it
is good.
does.
Um, but before we kind of get into that, let's just kind of start off with the more boring aspect, that being how like dragons are in like books. So two standout ones that I think, at least when it comes to dragons and books, obviously there's several different books out there which for all you guys all to read if you're interested. But the two that stand out of all dragons, to me at least, I don't know if this goes for you, Pri, but I would say The Hobbit and A Song of Ice and Fire, or commonly known as Game of Thrones. But for
Um,
good.
I mean, Skyrim and Ark is
Well, those are
it's
video games. We're gonna get to those
yeah.
soon, but we're gonna focus on kind of books right now. Like I said, those are two book series that I think kind of stand out when it comes to dragons. So let's briefly first talk about The Hobbit. Um, well, in the lore of that, there are several different dragons that have come and gone, but the one that stands out and that we see in the book, three books that are part of that trilogy, is Smog, um, who, like most dragons, has capable of flight and breathing fire. And one very interesting aspect about Smog, though, is that he has the ability to speak. It really kind of enhances, like, oh, this dragon has personality. That's very interesting to kind of explore,
Mm.
because like you're kind of like you get invested into it, because it's not just like, oh, there's a dragon, it's not really doing anything. It's kind of like, kind of just there. Yeah, it's cool, but it's whatever. But Smog kind of takes that to a different level, where what he's thinking, because he can speak. He can speak his mind. I think that's a very interesting thing. I think that's one of the reasons why this trilogy was so popular. What do you think?
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, yeah, I would say The Hobbit is like for the book wise. I think their mythology when it comes to dragons and everything else was a little bit better.
yeah,
Um, and how they went from like book to book with in the movies, especially with the movies of The Hobbit. Um,
yeah.
they were good, but I would have to say the books are better of how
I
it
mean, yeah.
goes.
Usually, when it comes to that, books are better. But even in we'll kind of combine the movie aspect with the book here, is that they did get a they I would say, when it comes to the movies for the three Hobbit books, is I feel like they did a somewhat of a good job to represent Smog and how he is in the books, kind of giving him that personality that he has and kind of enhancing it in their own unique way.
It's controversial
Yeah, I mean,
for definitely for people.
yeah, I mean, not everyone agrees with everything, but that's just how people react when it comes to certain things. But moving on, we have, like I previously mentioned, A Song of Ice and Fire, or commonly known as Game of Thrones. Um, so this is where it kind of gets a little more controversial, because in when it comes to the books, um, these you follow three main dragons, that being Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion. While they don't speak like Smog, they do somewhat have personalities, but at the end of the day, they're kind of dull, not to like the extent of Smog. Where over the course of the books, um, you do see that each of these dragons has a different personality and they act differently, um, which is interesting in its own right, but it doesn't go as far as The Hobbit. Now, when it came to the show, well, this show was a great depiction of the books, and most of it was pretty similar. Obviously, with everything, it things do change, and one of those things was the dragons in that, and they just were kind of there. They didn't really have like the personality like they did in the books. They're kind of just seen as like, oh, here's the dragon, you know, it's this massive fire breathing creature that is capable of mass destruction, and that's what it's used for, and it, which the A Song of Ice and Fire just really doesn't get that part of dragons right, but nonetheless they do look very cool in how they are kind of depicted. Do you have anything you want to add about that universe? Pre.
Necessarily, I don't know when
Yeah.
it comes to the different preferences when it comes. to those dragons. Necessarily though, um, how the books for dragons,
Mm.
um, it's it's way more controversial because when you have different dragons that are, illustrated, it's like you have the one that could be aggressive. You have one that could be nice. It
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
it really depends of how they're illustrated. Um, when it comes to them, that's my opinion. Um, when it comes to dragons, it really depends how they're illustrated and how they're made.
yeah, I mean, in the books they are definitely more interesting, but in the show they kind of just took that away to a certain extent. But I do plan on doing a Game of Thrones episode so I can definitely go more in depth with these dragons in that. But before we move on to something else, it is worth noting about the prequel show that is currently going on from that universe called House of the Dragon, which is based on the prequel book Fire and Blood. There are several more dragons in that, and the same can be kind of said when it comes to that as well, from the books to the show and all that. Their dragons really aren't as interesting, but they do look quite cool, and each dragon is different in its own unique way. Although they're all fire breathing, they kind of have like a different flame, which is kind of interesting. But they don't really do that in the shows either, which is kind of sad to see. I mean, who knows? We're only in season one of House of the Dragon, so maybe time will tell if they kind of get that flame part right. Before we move on, there's actually one other thing I want to mention about Game of Thrones that it's also a bit controversial. So the books only go up to there's only 5 books out of 7. So the show did end with season 8, and from roughly season 7 on, the HBO was making up their own story for the show, and in it spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen Game of Thrones. Um, I apologize, but I'm gonna kind of spoil a little bit of it. And this doesn't happen in the books, so if you're a fan of the books, this does not happen, or doesn't happen yet. But who knows what George R. R. Martin's gonna do. But when in the show, one of the dragons, Viserion, it's killed by the Night King, who is the leader of the army of the dead. In that, he kills Viserion and resurrects him, and it has always been kind of controversial whether once he's resurrected, if he's still considered like a fire breathing dragon or an ice breathing dragon, because his flame is blue, but it kind of still insinuates it being like fire, so we don't necessarily know. That's a bit controversial. I kind of want to get in there. So we don't actually know. There's no concrete answer of whether he's still a fire dragon with a blue flame or he becomes an ice dragon. So we don't actually know. But moving on, and I think, um, so we kind of talked about um, bit of kind of a movie and a TV show, and we're gonna do the same for this next representation of and I really think that this does a great job of depicting dragons in many different ways, and that is the How to Train Your Dragon franchise. Well, yes, you can say that it's more tailored towards kids, which is 100% true, but I still think it really holds up, and it does a great job of showing dragons. What do you think?
I agree 100%. Um, People may say it's meant for kids, but um, it does give you a taste of the dragon
Yeah, I mean
era.
and it. I mean, I just recently like rewatched all of it because there's 3 movies and there are a couple of different shows which are all excellent except for 2 of them, but not really gonna get into that. Um, just gonna talk about the like mainline stuff. I mean, you know, the cool thing about this franchise is, first of all, if you guys didn't know, it's actually a book series, and then they made it into like a movie and a show. But I feel like not many people know about that, and more focus on you know the shows and the movies.
Yeah,
But one thing that it does is it creates like this like vast world of you have so many different varieties and types of dragons. You know, I mean, well, yes, a lot of them kind of do breathe different types of like fire. I mean, majority of them are fire, but you have like some that don't breathe fire. And you know each dragon like kind of has its own personality and unique traits specific to that dragon. And in each different movie, TV show, or whatever, they expand upon everything that was built before that and create like new dragons with new abilities and different like new personalities.
yeah,
um and like I mean it's a great watch. I mean, obviously like stand out like dragons is obviously like Toothless, Stormfly, Hook Fang, like all that. It's just like what dragons can actually be. And I feel like a common thing with dragons is um, that they are seen as these very violent creatures. And I feel like that's, well, yes, that can be true, but I don't think that's always the case where, you know, dragons are peaceful creatures. Um, they don't want to fight, they kind of just want to be there, and I think, How to Train Your Dragon does a good job at showing this is just, you know, dragons are always seen as being these violent things that we need to fight because in most mythologies you have this hero like character who is off to go kill a dragon. But I mean, obviously, and the dragon fights back because it's a defense thing, and where that's seen in How to Train Your Dragon. But you also kind of see the peaceful aspect where you know when trained, they're you can be able to live peacefully with them and get along, right?
yeah. Um, I mean, oh, also with another thing, um, people. I mean, when it came to the movie of How to Train Your Dragon, when um, spoiler may be coming, but when Hiccup shot down Toothless and found him,
Yeah,
and everything when he untied him, it wasn't the greatest moment
oh yeah, I mean,
because
it's a defense mechanism. It's like you see this thing that you don't know, so your first kind of insight is to protect yourself.
yeah,
And it you saw that, like, especially in that, is he they started to bond with each other. And it's Toothless and all the other dragons, like, we're always right there to defend them because they developed this incredible bond with each other. And it kind of just shows you, like, the personality that these dragons have and like what's going through their brain and how like intelligent they really are to be able to not only understand people but just to bond with them and just create this like lifelong friendship, you know?
yeah.
Which
And
is,
that takes time to do it
yeah,
with because it won't be like an overnight thing. I mean, it took Hiccup like many days throughout the movie
yeah,
to do it
yeah,
because he was wild. And
exactly.
now, like, he was a wild dragon at the start. And then now, there's dragons all over with them, like, staying there with them by their side
Yeah.
permanently.
which is, the franchise is just amazing. And also, maybe one day down the line, we will also conduct a How to Train Your Dragon themed episode, but we'll see about that. Because we can go a lot more in detail about that and how they're depicted in that. Um, so lastly, let's kind of talk about some video games. Obviously, there are so many different video games that have dragons in them. There's so many. But to save some time, um, I think we're going to talk about two main games, that being Ark and Skyrim. So let's jump into Ark. Ark, so to avoid confusion, in Ark, well, yes, there are dragons, but they aren't referred to as dragons. They're referred to as wyverns, and that a wyvern and dragon are basically the exact same thing. It's just a wyvern is a different name for a dragon. There's several different names for dragons, and that's just one of them. And they're kind of your typical dragon. You obviously have like your fire, your lightning, your poison, your ice. There are a couple other variations, but those are the main line ones that you normally see in Ark. However, you can tame them because you can tame, a bunch of creatures in Ark. And they are one of the things you can tame. However, in order to get them, which is a cool and unique aspect, is you have to first of all find an egg, hatch it, and raise it, and then you kind of like it's yours, so to speak. Which is a kind of cool, But obviously, since it's a video game, kind of like a survival game, these dragons have absolutely no personality whatsoever in any sort of way. But they're still kind of fun to fly around on and just be like a absolute war machine. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's just like I feel like it's a good kind of representation as a dragon in a video game. Do you want to add anything?
I agree for sure on that. Especially in Ark, there's different types of wyverns in the game. I think there's just not just one. And I mean, I know this may not be on topic, but it's somewhat on topic. Where in some games there's a five-headed dragon, and when it comes to that one,
Yeah.
it's a whole different um change because it's five dragons into one body, sharing each thing. So fire, ice, many other types.
Yeah. Um, Obviously, another very popular um, game is Skyrim. And now I haven't really played too much of Skyrim, so I will let you take it away.
Okay. So when it came to Skyrim, also the mythology was Skyrim and dragons. The size difference was insane. Some of them can be decently sized, but they were huge in the games. And there is many types of them, as I recall. And and I remember in one of them that they didn't care what anything was. Like they would just go after people and just cause havoc because the instincts for a dragon, you don't know. Like, they don't know what your intentions are. They don't know if you're trying to harm it. They don't know if you're trying to be friends with it. Because I remember in the mission, you can see the dragon like attacking and shooting like fire, and it was really insane because you could see how a dragon is and what their instincts are.
Exactly.
I mean, I know it sounds crazy to where you can't, like, you don't know how they are, but you can see how they feel by what they're gonna do. Like if they're gonna attack you, then they're going to. They're not gonna hesitate because they want to make sure they're gonna be good. They want to make sure that they're not gonna get trapped or anything.
Yeah.
The instincts is what matters,
Exactly.
especially for dragons.
Yeah, and kind of what I was thinking about while you're talking about Skyrim is, I thought of another kind of representation of a dragon when it comes to a movie. Comes from the long-running Godzilla movies. You have, hopefully I don't butcher this, but you have King Ghidorah, who was the three-headed dragon that Godzilla fought, who challenged him for being king of all the monsters. Obviously, Godzilla does win in killing him, but I feel like he's also kind of like an interesting representation as well. Just wanted to mention that.
For sure.
But I mean,
And go ahead.
Do you have anything else in particular you want to add as a whole?
Yes, especially in Skyrim. There's many types of dragons. When it comes to the blood dragon, frost dragon, the elder one, the ancient dragon. Those, and they all have different types. Appearances as well, and that's another cool thing that I do like about the dragons, because they have different patterns, and I think that's another thing that what makes them so different from each other, or the patterns in the appearances, especially for like the powers, or not powers, but like abilities is what you would call them, I guess. I think those are what makes the dragons really good.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I think to sum up, it's one thing in particular that makes dragons a lot more fascinating and interesting is when you give them somewhat of a personality, because it you get more invested into that particular dragon, and you want to like know more about it, you want to learn more about them, and I hopefully that continues down the line. So I think that is definitely something that has shown it's like what makes it what makes the dragon a lot more popular. If you have any, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's it.
Before we end off, there are two funny, like 5 to 6 minute videos I want to show. They are related to Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon show, where they kind of just like what's happening in the show is they kind of give like a dragons like a subtitles like what they might actually be thinking. It's kind of funny. So I'm gonna give everyone a spoiler warning for that. So if you don't want to watch, you can click away. We're not going to share my screen. We're going to do this. So you can join that. I just think these are kind of funny to watch. So I'll watch this first one first. I'll put all the sound.
Dracarys. Dracarys. He'll be able to feed himself from now on.
Welcome home. Daenerys Stormborn.
Dracarys.
Growing fast.
I can't wait that long.
Those who survive, we shall enslave once more. Perhaps we'll make a slave of you as well. You swore me safe conduct.
I did. Bet my dragons made no promises, and you threatened their mother. My gold. You gave it to me, remember? We have to go home. Can you take me back to Marine? Dragon. The dragons are belly eating.
What's wrong with them?
They don't like the North. Don't be afraid.
So yeah, I thought that was kind of like, I didn't want to leave. Thought that was kind of like a funny little video.
Yeah, that was. I like the one part where he said, "I approve."
Yeah, it kind of just gives him a bit more of a kind of like a personality, but obviously, you know, not really. So let's do the one from House of the Dragon.
Welcome back, Princess. Trust your ride was pleasant.
Dracarys!
I pledge fealty to them, and shall defend them against all enemies in good faith and without deceit. I swear this by the old gods and you.
King of the Andals, and the Roinar, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and Protector of the Realm, do hereby name
So there's that one. So that kind of I just wanted to show those. I thought those were kind of fun. You can go ahead and leave that. Pretty. So this concludes this about dragons. If you feel that you enjoyed it, please make sure to like, comment, and if you aren't subscribed, please subscribe. We much appreciate it, and it really helps us out a ton. And we'll catch you in the next one.